You, my dear, is a gift to yourself, a gift to this universe. As you shine in the darkest of hours and let us believe that stars are present even in the darkest moments. So, they show us that life is beautiful, even when it is the hardest. So thank you for being there for yourself, and thank you for showing others that you shine the brightest. So, do they? So, as I started the part with gifts, today's story is our favorite classic, The Gift of Magi, the short story by O. Henry. $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of which it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher, until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 terms, total in 3 terms, Della counted it. $1.87, and the next day it would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So, Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from one stage to the second, take a look at that home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It didn't exactly beggar description, but it certainly had the word on the lookout for the Mendicity squad. In the vestibule below was a letterbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal's finger could coax a ring even. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the bridge during the former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now when the income was shrunk to $20, the letter of Dillingham looked kind of blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting a modest, unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly, let me tell you, greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her crying and attended to her cheeks with the powdered rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a grey cat walking a grey fence in a grey backyard. Sounds awfully similar. Well, Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87, with which to buy Jim a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with which this was the result. $20 a week doesn't go really far. Expenses has been greater than she could have calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. Her Jim, should I say. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something really nice for him. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by Jim. There was a pier glass between the window of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of longitudinal stripes, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his look. Della, being slender, had mastered that art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes, gorgeous eyes, were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color. Within 20 seconds, let me tell you, just 20 seconds. Rapidly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, there were two possessions of James Dillingham Young's in which they both took a mighty pride. One, James' gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other one was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flood across the air shaft, Della would have let her hair hang out the window someday to dry just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. And had King Solomon been the janitor with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, and just to see him pluck at his beard from envy, What a sight that would have been. So now, Della's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knees and made itself almost a beautiful, gorgeous garment for herself. Once she fluttered for a minute and stood still while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket. On went her old brown hat, with a rill of skirts and with the brilliant sparkle still in her eyes. She fluttered outdoors and down the stairs to the streets, where she stopped the sign and read, Sir Frayne, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked so frank. "Will you buy my hair?" asked Della. "I buy hair," said Madame. "Take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it." Down rippled the brown casket. $20, she said, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. "Give it to me, quick," said Della. "Oh, darling," and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. Just forget the metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. And finally, she found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by any meticulous ornamentations, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might feel properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it and, on slight account of the old leather strap that he used in the place of a chain. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out of her curling irons and lighted the gas and went on work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, let me tell you, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny closing curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. "If Jim doesn't kill me," she said to herself, "before he takes a second look at me, he will say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what would I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made, and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Very practically, in fact. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his steps on the stairs away, down on the first flight, and she turned white just for a moment. She had a habit of saying little silent prayers about simplest things every day. And now she was whispered, "Please God, make him think I'm still pretty, please." The door opened and Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22 and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat and he was without gloves in a cold winter. Jim stepped inside the door, as immovable as a shutter at the scent of quill. His eyes were fixed upon Della, and there was an expression in them that she couldn't read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly and with the peculiar expression on his face. It made Della unsettling. Della wriggled off the table and went for him. "Jim, darling," she cried, "just don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold it because I couldn't have lived through the Christmas without giving you a present. It will grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grew awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim. Let's be happy. You don't know what a nice gift I have got for you." "You have cut off your hair?" asked Jim, laboriously, as if he had not arrived at the patent fact that yet even after the hardest mental labor. "Yes, cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I am still me without my hair, aren't I?" Jim looked about the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said, with an air almost of idiocy. "You need not look for it," said Della. "It is sold, I tell you, sold and gone too. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Please be good to me. For it went for you. Maybe the hair on my head were numbered. Please." She went on without a sudden serious sweetness. "But nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on, Jim?" Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. this dark assertion will be illuminated later on when we know what was the real present. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said, "about me. I don't think there is anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you will unwrap the package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." Della's white fingers, and they were nibbling, and nibble tore at the string and paper, and then there was an ecstatic scream of joy, and then alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting power of the lord of the flat. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped, let me tell you, worshipped for a long, in a Broadway window. They were beautiful combs, pure tortoise shell and jeweled with rain. Just the shade to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. The beauty of desiring something that is gracious. And now they are hers. The traces that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, My hair grows awfully fast, Jim." And then Della leapt upon a little like a little shined cat and cried, Oh, wait. Jim had not yet seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly and upon her open palm, and the dull, precious metal seemed to flash with the reflection of her bright, ardent spirit. "Isn't it a dandy, Jim? I hunted it all over the town to find it. You will have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me a watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," he said, "let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them for a while, yes? They are too nice to use, just as a present. I actually sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs, and now suppose you put the chops on." The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas present. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of defalcation. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasure of their house. But in the last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. And of all who give and receive gifts, as such, they are the wisest. Everywhere they were the wisest. They are the Magi. This is the end of this classic short stories. But let me tell you something to remind. The fact that I said, you, my dear, are the gift to yourself. You stars shine the brightest and darkest of days. The universe is valuable, precious, gorgeous, gracious, and most compatible because of you. Because the fact that universe never would have been the same without you, shining stars. But let me tell you something. You are the kindest soul in the hardest and in challenging times. So let me tell you a secret. As you are the kindest, my darlings, please be kind to yourself. As you and I are meeting every week from now on, well, every week on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, on the weekends, I will be waiting for you. Thank you for being such generous gifts to this universe and to me, to being a precious reader. This is your host Autumn, and this is the season 1 of Classic Short Stories. Thank you, everyone. Good night. And remember, be a gift to yourself, be kind to yourself, and be the stars.